Welcome to this edition of Five Words in the Chapel, or the choir, or the one person. It's me. It's just me. It's Sean. I don't know how to start or finish things, but I know how to get it done in the middle. How are you? How are you all doing? You all seem wonderful. Welcome back to Five Words. This is episode 75. That's a milestone number, you know? 1975, that was a great year. Then again, I wouldn't know. I wasn't born yet. And neither was my guest, who is a long friend of mine, even though the first time we met, funny story, the first time we met was outside of an open mic in New York in like 2007, and he pretended to be an open micer. I don't know why. I think because he's from Boston and he just wanted to fuck with me because I was a new guy. But he asked me all these tips on how to do open mics and where to go, and I gave him all these tips. And then I saw him like the next night murder it at a show. So that was how our friendship started out. But he's actually a very fucking good guy, a wordsmith. Dare I say, if he were the blacksmith version of him, would have forged too many swords, enough to arm an entire country. This is the one, the only, Mike Kaplan. You know him. You love him. He's got a new album out called AKA, and this was a crazy conversation because Mike is he's an ayahuasca guy. You wouldn't think it, you know, Boston. I don't think, when I think Boston, I don't think people who eventually go on ayahuasca voyages. Is that what they're called? I don't think you call them trips. I feel like trips implies that it's like acid or shrooms. It's too simple. Like of everyone I've talked to who's done ayahuasca, it seems more like a voyage. And Mike has taken this voyage a lot. So we talk a lot about that, a lot about the inner workings of the mind, and just a lot about finding your inner you, the you that's already inside of you, that's just wearing too much you and just needs to take off a few layers of you so it could be free and truthfully the you. That's what we talk about. That didn't make sense, but it will after you listen to the episode. How's about that shit? Little teaser for you. Listen to it. Check out his new album. It's called AKA, and he explains why it's called that. Mike Kaplan, fucking hilarious. And if you're listening to this now, know that if you're on the East Coast, or if you feel like traveling to the East Coast in a safe manner, I will be at Soul Joel's Comedy Club and Lounge in Royersford, Pennsylvania, on the 29th of January. You should come see it. It'll be Cypher Sounds. It'll be myself, James Mattern hosting, and I believe Soul Joel himself making a goddamn appearance. How's about that shit? Who is Soul? Soul Joel sounds like a ayahuasca shaman. That sounds like the name of an ayahuasca shaman. Soul Joel, but he's a comedian. And Mike Kaplan sounds like a comedian, and he is, but probably will be an ayahuasca shaman soon. That also does stand up, which would be that would be an all right life. If you just, your audience is only people on a fucking ayahuasca fucking journey, man, and you guide them hilariously through it all. Anyway, this was the spitballing segment of 5 Words. Let's get to it. Enjoy the episode. Love you all. And we're back. Like that. This episode never actually ends. This is episode 75, or is it episode number 1? And this is just segment 75. We don't fucking know. That's not the point for us to know or care. Just keep listening. And also, I'm very excited right now because this guest I have not seen or heard in far too long. The one and only Dr. Mike Kaplan. That's how
Thank you.
Yeah. That's how I introduce you to people. I say, are you guys fans of Dr. Mike Kaplan?
It sounds very nice of you to say. Just for your listeners, I am not a doctor. I do not have any medical degrees or otherwise doctor degrees, but I'm happy to know you, happy to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
I feel like if you were an actual degreed up doctor, I think you'd be a neuroscientist, a neurosolid. No, a neuroscientist. Is that even a thing? Did I just make up a word?
No, that's a thing.
Neuroscientist? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, I studied I got a major in psychology, and I studied linguistics in grad school, and in studying linguistics in undergrad, I did take a class it was an introduction to cognitive science, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, neuroscience is more the brain parts of things, and I feel
Right.
like linguistics and philosophy and psychology, which I also studied, those are like the mind, like with neuroscience they're like, let's look at what's actually the firing in the brain,
Right.
nerve cell style, and I'm like, let's just talk about how we feel and what we think, so. But if I were to get, that's why I probably didn't get a higher up degree, because I don't want to deal with actual brains. That's gross. I just want to talk about stuff with my mind and my mouth.
Like you don't want to deal with the physical realm of the brain. You just want to deal with what the brain does, what happens
Uh,
inside
ex-
of the brain.
Exactly. I never
Yeah.
thought about it like this, but kind of like, I'm not saying that everyone, like, there's a spectrum of, let's say, from like nerd to jock, or from writer to performer in comedy. And it
All right.
seems like, like philosophers and linguists and cognitive scientists are kind of in the middle. But like, I'm a nerd, and like, doctors, those are the jocks. I call them joctors.
Doctors. Yeah,
They're
bro.
doing physical stuff. Like they're like Broniacs, and
Yeah, yeah, bro.
I'm just.
Yeah. Broniac.
Oh
Jesus.
yeah.
That's a I mean, good Lord, that's a TV show that had one. That's like a pilot of a TV show that people are like, why wasn't this made into a series? And then it gets made into a series, and everyone's like, oh, it should have probably just been a movie. Great movie, great movie. Maybe a sequel.
Love it.
But that's I mean, okay, but that's interesting because so like if you're in a band, stylistically and as a human being, you're the lead singer, not the guitar player. You don't want to play the instrument. You just want to sing this. You want to sing. You don't want to play. Does that make sense?
That's a that that analogy makes complete sense, and also calls me completely on what I'm saying, because I also do play the guitar and love playing guitar. And actually, so my girlfriend, over the past many months, has been engaging in a lot of different hobbies, like for example, knitting and beading, and like creating things with her hands.
Wait,
And she's like,
beat
what?
like beating people?
BEAD, beading, making.
Oh,
Uh, oh yeah,
my girlfriend's been knitting and roughing people up for hire.
yeah, just
a
stuff
hit
with her hands, obviously.
beating
Yeah.
people up. She's she gets hired to fuck people
Yeah.
up. That's
And so she asked me the other day, she's like, have you throughout your life, like, what have you made with your hands? And I was like, like, I mean, when I went to summer camp, I did there was a glass blowing station at the camp that I could make things there. And like, I've made things out of wood in elementary
yeah,
school, but as an adult, I'm like, so I more make, jokes with my mind. I make,
right.
I write. Yeah, I sometimes type and write with my hands. But so I wrote a song the other day with my guitar, and the lyrics of the song are basically like, making things with my hands. And because I do like using my hands on the guitar, and I played violin since I was 4. So physically, like, I do like playing instruments, but it's to make the sound, it's to make the ethereal,
Right.
the non-physical thing come out of it. I'm happy for the means to the end, and it does feel good to tactilely, like, touch things and create things. But yes, I tend more towards the conceptual than the
Right.
physical, some historically.
What's interesting, as you're saying all this, I'm remembering like, of course I knew you played an instrument. I remember you used to be part of this two-person act from time to time. It was like your side act. You
Oh
and
yeah,
hold on, Sherman, Micah Sherman. Is
you
that
got
you?
it. Oh
Yes, Micah Sherman. Where's he these days?
yes.
Do you know where you still in touch with him?
Oh yeah, he's a very good friend of mine. So we lived in Boston, met there like 15 years ago doing
Right.
comedy, and we both moved to New York in about 2008, and then during the pandemic, he and his fiance moved to Florida. They moved to not New York,
Right, right,
uh,
right.
as some people are doing, like because we
Right.
can all do
Yeah.
our anything from anywhere. But we've
True.
been in touch in recent days and weeks. You ever play the game Code Names? We've been our old Boston comedy crew that Shane Moss is a big
Shane
game
Moss. Yeah.
player.
Yeah.
So Shane introduced me to Code Names, I believe, or possibly I'd heard about it, but Shane has facilitated. He just loves games, and a lot of us just love Code Names. It's such a fun game, and so he started a sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, whatever we can all get together. He calls it the Nice Boys of Comedy,
The nice.
and it's just
Yeah.
so it's like us, like Zach Sherwin, Josh Gondelman, some people who aren't boys as well.
Yeah.
We've stopped calling it the Nice Boys, but
Right.
yeah. So I've been seeing Micah's face a lot, and yeah, he's a guy who I loved. So this is exactly the same kind of dichotomy that we were just discussing. Like Micah and I used to host a show together at the Comedy Studio in Boston, where I started out,
Right.
and it was working together. Like we wrote songs together, and he was just his main art these days is like improv and acting. He also writes things and sketches and stuff, but he was always, when he did stand up, like the guy we would, like me, Joe List, and Shane would be in the back of the room, like loving everything that he was doing, just dying. He was like the funniest thing because he was so good in the moment. I feel like at the time, he and Rory Scovel were like the two people who opened up my mind
Okay.
to, in stand up, like being present and like doing the same things differently, or doing crowd work or riffing or just making things up, imagining things in the moment.
I like what you just said so much. Doing the same things differently. That is a
Oh,
very
yeah.
important tool to have, like idea to have as a stand-up comedian. It's like, no, I'm still going to do my written bit that I've worked hard to make funny, just differently now. It's going to be the same thing, but it's different. Like, that's important.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I saw Rory. I met Rory, and he was like the first person that I really thought of as doing this. I mean, and I'm sure people have been doing this long before we were alive.
Yeah, right.
But he was
Rory, yeah.
he like I started out in Boston, like doing joke writing in 2002 about, and
Right.
just you write. I wrote a joke and I performed it, and it either worked or it didn't, and you'd either give up on it or try to change it or whatever it is. But then I saw Rory do. We were in a competition. 16 people doing 5 minutes a night for 6 nights in a row, and almost everyone's just doing their tight five. Just like it's a competition. They've prepared it every night for a different audience and different judges, the same 5 minutes. And Rory was one of the only people. There was like maybe 1 or 2 people that every night he would sometimes do the same jokes in a different order, or one of them would just continue. He'd continue to live in the world of the joke and just establish new things and work with the space that we were in. And it seemed like, people are like, it seemed risky. It seemed brave. Like, aren't you concerned with like the fact that you might be saying something that doesn't get a laugh, that you've honed and polished and curated over months and years of working? And he's like, I'm having fun. And we're like, isn't it risky to have fun? And then, so that was such a beautiful lesson to be offered. And like Micah Sherman represented the same thing to me. So when we were working together, I was like, in the beginning, like I think we both like rubbed off on each other and learned things from each other. Like I was like, I'm a guy who'll stand still and not move from the mic stand and just talk. And like Micah's like, I'm gonna move all around and do different things with my face and voice and body. And I was like, oh, I guess I could also move around a little bit. And like I move around and do things with my face and voice and body much more than I did in the beginning. Like I used to be just like, a straight ahead stand up robot. And now I'm a wild moving around stand up robot.
Yeah, right. The air is the machine. You're one of those. The air has been turned on, and yeah, you're able to move.
Exactly.
Wait, now, because I remember you guys you played what looked like a guitar, but just the neck. What was that? Was it was a guitar?
It is the technical name of it. It was a Martin backpacker guitar. So yeah, it's exact same strings as the guitar, but it doesn't have the body. It is just like a straight line and looks like people are like, is that a lute? Is it whatever it is? But yeah, it was just an easily transportable, almost like carrying no guitar at all.
Right, right. And I remember, you should still know. There's every now and again when I log on to Netflix, I still, because you guys had a moment in a song where you like broke and then sung praise to the red envelope that just arrived, because there was a
Yes.
time when I think there is a majority of people who don't remember that Netflix used to be mail. It used to be snail mail only. Like, you got online and ordered the movie, but then, Netflix streaming was not the first thing. It used to come in envelopes. And I think about that, and there's a line that was, I think it was, "It's time for Mr. Shao Shao to take a Shao Shao," in refer to a shower, in reference to a shower. Right?
Oh,
I still think
100%. Here's
yeah, go for it. Go, no, do it. What? Yeah.
I thank you, number one. I love that first we're like, we're older men now who
Yeah.
are like, and our old men, like, these kids get off.
Yeah.
Like, hey, these kids don't remember that Netflix. Yeah, sure, you would order it online, but it came to you in a physical form. You had to put it into a player. It didn't just come up. You had to wait 3 days uphill both ways with the snow. And so that song, it's funny. This is a nice full circle thing in this very conversation. Your memory is almost 100% spot on. The song, I believe, is called Dr. Song Song. And
Dr.
the
Song
first
Song.
lyrics are, "It's time for Dr. Shao Shao to take a showy show." So I like that you gave me the respect of calling me doctor. And you're like, I know there's one doctor here. It's Dr. Shao Shao.
But I stripped Dr. Shao Shao of his credentials. He's just Mr. Shao Shao now, apparently.
You passed them along to me. Yeah,
I give them to you. Yeah, man. That I used to love that when you guys would do that song. It was very, because you played your, like you said, your Martin, and did he have like he had a percussion type instrument? Oh no, he beatboxed.
Yes,
in
that song he 100% beatboxed.
Fuck,
And
man.
that song, I'd say that was our biggest, our most resonant. I hesitate to say hit, but that song I feel like the most people talk to me about it. Still, they're like, every once in a while, because I mean, for your listeners, the main conceit of the song was that sometimes it's hard to make yourself get out of bed and do the basic things that you think are good to do, like showering. And it was kind of like, humorously motivational. But there are people who are like, sometimes that song I think of that song and I get in the shower and it's meaningful.
Is it recorded anywhere?
Oh, yeah. Micah and I created an album in 2012, 2013. The album is called Please Be Seated, and it's all the places, Spotify and such. And you can call up Spotify, have them send you a CD in the mail. You can get, I believe you can, I still have the physical CDs, so I think you can order them through my website and possibly Bandcamp as well. But you can definitely listen to the song exists online in a way that's funny, because the only thing that doesn't hold up about it is that you do have to know that the red envelope of Netflix was a thing that stamps that song in time. But the album is called Please Be Seated, and that song I believe we called Dr. Song Song.
It's funny because oh man. I like the idea of calling. If you email Spotify, they'll send you a CD. But if you call them, they'll send you a cassette. They'll send you the cassette.
Oh yeah. And if you walk
us
to their offices, then they will fly us to your house.
Yeah, exactly. In person. If you ride any sort of horse and carriage, they'll play it for you on a sonogram. That's not a thing. They can't play it for you on a sonogram.
If you send a carrier pigeon to them, then we will bring you to a pregnant lady whose baby will perform the song for you via sonogram.
Thank you. See, this is commitment to one's craft.
Yeah.
You know? So wait, I can't remember. I know we've had this conversation. I know you're a Boston guy as far as comedy is concerned, but did you grow up in?
No, I grew up in New Jersey.
But you are an East Coast guy.
I am. I've always been a Northeast guy. I grew up in a few different places in New Jersey, Livingston, Allendale. My mom lives in Allendale now.
Okay.
Uh, and so that's where I go to visit her when that's a thing. But my parents got divorced, and my dad lives in a different town as well. So all over North Jersey. And then I went to Brandeis outside Boston in the Boston area
Right.
for undergrad, and then I went to Boston University, and started doing comedy. As Boston was like my chosen home. Like I didn't choose to live in New Jersey
Right.
unless I did before this incarnation began. But mid incarnation, the adult living choice that I made with my life was to live in Boston. So that's why Boston feels like home, and it is where I was born as a comedian. So
Right. Right.
adult
Right.
life, Boston from age 18 to 30, and then I moved to New York.
That's such a because like you prove that stereotypes are can be oftentimes just completely wrong because I mean like I've known you for 12 years now probably, and even 12 years ago you never came across as like Jesus Christ, this fucking guy, this union delegate of a Bostonian, or the other way. It wasn't like Jesus, this fucking arrogant Harvard prick. You like, you know what I'm saying? Like you always just kind of seem like, if anything, if I, after meeting you the first time, if I had to guess, I'd be like, I don't know, this guy was probably homeschooled in Oakland, California, you know, like, um, and also, and everybody knows, probably it's funny because like, if I know you're not a Trump supporter, but if it would be, it's interesting because like, it would be like if Mike Kaplan were a Trump supporter, it's only because Trump was the first president who attempted to use an acronym. And it was like, Mike's like, I hate all of his politics, but come on, what other president tried to get an acronym or actually used one, you know? But
I hear what you're saying. I do love democracy more than I love acronyms. I will
yeah,
gladly sacrifice
I thought you were about
my
to
love
unleash.
of
I thought you were about to unleash the acronym that is democracy. We were like, well, democracy is an acronym for, and you just.
Oh, that would be fun. I'll see if I can do it. Democracy, doing everything, maybe, or could really, actually, couldn't. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, that isn't that far
given
off.
given a little extra time,
Yeah.
I'll come up with it by the end of the show.
Wait, defining everyone means often caring racially and not not currency yielding. That doesn't.
Yeah,
It's hard. It's a hard one.
it's a fun exercise.
Yeah. But like you're a guy who you're someone who I think of now. I mean, I've always thought of you as a great comedian, but now I'm like, when I think of you, Mike, I'm like, oh man, it seems like the past 6, 7, maybe even 8 years now, you've been playing, or not playing, but like experimenting. You've been getting out there. I know you like to have your ayahuasca experiences, and I know you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like, and that is something like is very interesting to me because I am terrified of the idea of doing it, but I'm so simultaneously like amused and like not amused. Amused is the wrong word, but curious about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, you seem like you'd fit right in. You're like a character that I would hallucinate while experiencing an ayahuasca ceremony. Like you are, your energy is so like big and present and just like, I mean, of course, no one should do it who doesn't want to do it. I
Right.
mean, being afraid, like, I'd be happy to talk to you about this for hours. I'm like, what are you like afraid of specifically? I mean, you maybe
Oh,
you
I can
have
tell you.
experiences. Oh, please.
No, because it's the same thing. I think that anyone like myself, like I do have like diagnosed clinical obsessive compulsive disorder, but also it's like
Yes.
the fear someone like me has with any mind altering substance is the idea that you won't come back from it. The idea that like, and like it's proven time and time again that you do. But like even with weed, if I get like too high, I'm like, oh God, this is it for me now. Even though I know that's not the case,
Oh
and like
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the guide that I have gone to all the times that I've done it says a thing that speaks to this, which again might not help you more than intellectually, and might
Right.
not help you in the moment. But sometimes the more you think of it, the more you remember it, the more you know it's so. He says, the effects come and the effects go. Like that is about psychedelic experiences. That's about weed experiences. It's about every emotional experience. Like
Right.
every time you felt like you were trapped, and I've had experiences where I've felt like, oh yeah, is it this forever on mushrooms or salvia,
Yeah.
or possibly during an ayahuasca experience. But to know, like, it always has been so. It would be like the rarest unique experience if you're like, okay, this one right now, I get all the ones leading up to now were
Yeah.
yeah, that was, those were all, just kidding, practice. Yeah, of course those came and went, but this now, because of course that's what, like, the now is the only moment that we are experiencing. And especially when under the influence of certain substances, like our we don't imagine anything else, we can't imagine anything else. And sometimes a person said to me once, like, they're like, I don't want to do ayahuasca because what if I do it and then I'm never the same again? And I said to them, what if you never do it and you're always the same? Like, those are both equal nonsense
Right. Right.
sentences.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we're always constantly changing. Every substance is a mind altering substance. Food alters your mind from hungry to not hungry. I know there's a
Mm.
spectrum, of course, like, not every substance makes you see things that aren't physically present in the room with you, or have emotional experiences or spiritual experiences,
Right.
or even physical tactile experiences. But so do you have you enjoyed weed and or other substances at times?
Oh, so, oh, certainly. Like I've definitely like that's but for me, for example, marijuana, like that's basic, but like 9 times out of 10, I will experience like some form, and there's a spectrum as well, some form of anxiety, some form of like, oh God, it's coming any minute now. Oh shit. Why am I so obsessed with
Hmm.
clocks? Why do I care? Why do I care?
Haha.
But then there's that
Can
one time where it's just like
Yeah.
a beautiful present high where you're just like, this is what I've been searching for. So it's like, yeah,
I want to say two things, one
go
quick
for it,
and
please.
one quicker. But I want to, but I won't. First, I love the why am I obsessed with clocks? And I mean, I
Yeah,
of course the answer is like, because you have obsessive compulsive disorder, and
yeah,
clocks are there, and
yeah,
clocks
true.
are. But the other thing is, this was a thing that was also basically the same message of like finding peace or letting go under the influence of, like, pot isn't usually my thing. Like, I
Right.
sometimes will these days take an edible and then like lie down and feel my body, which I now understand I can also do without the edible, but I just don't often lie down and feel my body. But one time I was at a friend's wedding weekend, and so it was like we were all at this campsite, and the night before the wedding, it was just like there was a talent show, and then there was an after party. And I'm at the after party, just in somebody's cabin, and somebody hands me a vape pen. And I was like, I always, the joke that I say sometimes, which is the truth, is like, I would every once in a while, like buying a lottery ticket, I take a hit of weed to make sure that I'm still not lucky, to make sure that it's still not the thing that I do all the time, because it doesn't usually work. But this particular time, a vape, like, I don't like smoking because of fire in my body. I do like a vape better, or an edible better. An edible
Right.
the best, because there's an amount. Be like, oh, take this amount and it should have this physiological effect. I'm now
Right.
now
Yeah.
completely pendulum swung. I'm on the other side of it, and I'm like, I like measuring things in the physical world and then putting them in my physical body, and then being able to quantify the emotional and otherwise reaction. But so the vape went into me.
Yeah.
The vapor went in, and then and I took a big hit, and almost immediately it filled my brain with like the best feeling, like the kind that I'm like, oh yeah,
Ah.
this is why people do this. And I felt great for a second, and then I was like, oh no, what if I took too much? And it's just gonna keep getting bigger and bigger, and it won't even like the good feeling won't fit in my head, and it won't feel good anymore. And I was able to, I don't know, I don't know if it took place in the course of an hour or literally 3 seconds, but the way that I frame it now is I was like, well, okay, I might freak out later, but it feels good now. Don't ruin now by freaking out now about whether you're going to freak out later if you can avoid it. You can't always talk yourself down, but I was like, I'm either going to freak out now and later or only later. So it's either there's going to be 0 freakouts possible, 1 freakout possible, or 2 freakouts possible. If I don't freak out now, then there's at most 1 later. If I do freak out now, there might be 1 now and 1 later. But also, if I don't freak out now, there might be none total. And like that ended up being like the extent of the freak out, because I was like, okay, basically the message was, if you're gonna freak out, if you're gonna freak out later, freak out later. You don't also have to freak out now about whether you're gonna freak out later, because don't worry, you'll freak out later if you have to freak out later. Don't concern yourself with the later freak out now. If you're gonna freak out now, sure, freak out now, but don't freak out now about later, because that's later's freak out time.
And then eventually you just keep putting the freak out off till even the freak out's like, I'm bored, I gotta go. I got someone else. Some kid just took salvia in fucking Connecticut. I gotta go hang out with him.
That's the thing. It's sort of like, I used to be, if I would forget a word or I was like, I was just thinking of something, and you spend so much time trying to capture it. If I let that go, then either I will eventually remember on my own that I'm not trying to force it, or I'll forget that I even cared about it. And like, you ever have I'm sure that we've all had experiences where like a year ago, 10 years ago, 10 months ago, whatever it is, that there was a time when you forgot something and didn't remember it. And right now, you probably you weren't even thinking that you're not living your life in that moment of being like, man, remember when I forgot formaldehyde and I couldn't come up with it. And now I never forget the word formaldehyde since the time that I did forget it. But
I carry around formaldehyde in a flask to pour on high school kids' cigarettes. Clickums. Wait, but you've done these. You've done ayahuasca sessions. What, like, have you done 20 or so or more?
I would say more than 20.
That's pretty cool. That's you. Would you say you do it like, have you done it during COVID? Have you done it during?
No, that's a good question. There have been opportunities offered, and there are people who have gathered at times as safely as possible, and I'm not as safely as possible for me is not gathering. It is not essential for me at this point.
Right.
So yeah, I have not done it since, I think, probably January or February this year.
Okay.
But I would say that since maybe 2014, when I did my first 1 to 3 of them, like after the first one, I was like, oh, this is something that I will do again, because I found it. The first 2 that I did were kind of. It's a funny way to think about it, I think, because I don't know if this is how it works, but for me, the first 2 experiences I had were just like ethereally beautiful. Like I felt like just love coursing through all of my being, just like visceral, like gratitude, like firing all through me. And then the third one, I had that expectation because it was the only thing I'd experienced up to that point. And the third one, I experienced physical and emotional pain, discomfort, distress. Like ultimately, afterwards, I felt it valuable in a way. So the way I'm like, oh, it's sort of like a drug dealer. They give you the first couple for free, and then they're like, okay, now here's the cost. And so I think it's not I wouldn't say it's recreational. I would say that it's like recreational. It's like curational in a way as well. It's, it's work. It's like It's like meditation can be, it's like therapy can be, it's like, if some people on under the influence of different plant medicines or mushrooms or sometimes LSD or weed, sometimes you're just having a good time, but sometimes you're, getting inner inner work done, inner thought, feeling, emotional, life work done. And so I think that initially I was
Interesting.
like, man, this is great. And later, and people were like, are you sure did you get the stuff? Because everyone doesn't come out of it thinking
Right.
this is great.
Yeah.
They might think it's like meaningful or valuable or useful or challenging or painful or frustrating. Like, and it's been the guide that I go to comes from Peru, and I think
Okay.
in the lore of the culture, uh, there is like the heavenly realm, the earthly realm, and the realm of the dead, the nether realm, as represented from bottom to top by like the snake, the cat, and the condor. And so that's why there might be like tropes of people like, oh, did you see snakes? Were there a bunch of snakes? And like sometimes you might see snakes, and sometimes you might have different animals, but those are sort of like the icons. And so I feel like the first two that I had were like in the heavenly realm, and then
Right.
since then I've had ones that sort of go up and down, sometimes focusing in one, sometimes through all of them, sometimes a couple. um
But it's like
but yeah,
it's a day, right? It's like an 8 hour or
Uh,
more.
most of the times that I've done it, we would gather at, let's say, 8 p.m.
Hmm.
And then maybe the guide would start like and then around 9, like talking to us and like letting us, if there are new people, like here's what's going to happen, and then we would all drink this tea sometime between 9 and 10, 9:30, 10,
Hmm.
and then the actual experience. I mean, it can greatly vary, but I would say usually around, let's say, 2 in the morning will be when the final like chime rings to indicate that the ceremony aspect, the ceremonial experience is over. You might still be uh, not in your, you might still be up there, out there, in there, wherever there is.
Right.
But that's when like sort of the process begins to dissipate or come down, or you start to, it's sort of like dreamlike in a way. So that's when they're like, okay, it's like time to wake up in the morning. And sometimes you're like, okay, I'm half awake, half asleep, still experiencing the characters in my dream, and let me write these
Ah,
down real quick
yeah, yeah.
before it disappears, but you'll remember the important ones later. uh and so I would say, yeah, I would then there's sort of like they put out like some food in the other room because you've been fasting for about a day.
Ah,
And and so there's like a breaking the fast, and then quietly chatting with people who are open to doing that. Some people are still like lying down and being in their own space, but I would say, like, yeah, the quickest it's ever been is like 4 hours total, like from
okay.
door to door, or not door to door, but from
Yeah.
opening doorway to closing doorway.
Right.
um and there was one time when, like, it started at 8 or 9 and then finishes at 2 in the morning, and I was still like going hard, and there was like, it was only like seven people total, and there's
Right.
like, the guide and an assistant. I think probably only one assistant for that number of people. The guide goes home, the assistant's like cleaning up, I'm just still sitting there, like waiting for, I'd done it enough by this point that I was like, I will eventually be able to stand up, but right now I cannot stand up. Like,
Wow.
I didn't feel physically capable at that point of walking down the stairs to my car, which I don't usually drive home after, but sometimes I will drive there and then like leave the car there and then take a lift or something home. Sometimes
Right.
I'll just lift there and back, depending where it is, what the circumstances are. But there have been times when I come down completely and then feel comfortable driving home an hour later or
Sure.
two
Yeah, yeah.
hours later. But this time it was like till 6 in the morning that they were like, this yoga studio has to open up soon, so we have to go. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow. Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
did manage, this was, so it was like almost 10 hours. So it,
Wow.
it can be that. But I would say between 3, 4, 5 hours is a a classic of in the experiences that I've had, it's definitely good to plan to have nothing to do the day before and nothing to do the day after, because you don't know, and you'll want to prepare and you'll
Right.
want to process.
Prepare and process. I mean, and you tell me, but I've heard lore of people like, vomiting and convulsing and sort of like having these like physical reactions to not super
Sure.
common, but like, yeah, I've heard that does happen for some.
Well, I think here's a funny analogy that I've thought of recently that I don't get to share
Okay.
frequently, because not everyone is aware of. I feel like you're going to be the perfect recipient of this analogy.
Do it.
So the very first thing that I ever heard about ayahuasca was that, oh, you do it in the jungle and it makes you vomit. Like, no, thank you. I don't.
I
think
did
I
hear
wanna
the
do
jungle.
that.
Yes, I did
Yeah.
hear you do it in the jungle. Yeah.
And so now that I've done it, and they always do, when I go, they give you a bucket, and the guide is a funny guy, and I say this in my comedy sometimes when I talk about it. He says sometimes at the beginning, he says, now sometimes a person may vomit, and other times everyone may vomit. And he's like, and if other people vomit and you don't be jealous. Like, he's like, it's not a vomiting experience, but it is sometimes they call it cleaning or purging. It's like, and it's not the whole, it's like, usually there's exceptions, but if you vomit, it's like a couple minutes of the multi-hour experience. And it also,
Right.
it feels good to do it because you're getting something out of you that you want to get out of you. And then sometimes that kicks the experience into gear. But so because it's such a minimal fraction of the experience, but it looms so large in the experience of people who haven't done it, it is, to me, like, I feel like when people ask me about ayahuasca, they ask about, oh, what about the vomiting, though? The same way that non-comedians ask me, they're like, oh, you're a comedian? What about hecklers, though? And I'm like, hecklers are really not the large, they loom so large in the experience of people who aren't comedians. Like, oh, yeah, you're a comedian. You're, over the course of 20 years, you're going to come across some hecklers, but is it most of what you do? Maybe for some people. Maybe there's some people that invite it, and
Yeah, they need
based
it.
on their audience or
Yeah.
the venues or what have you. But I would say that hecklers are like a single-digit fraction of my experience as a comedian, but they're present in every interview that I get asked, questions
Right.
about. They're like, hecklers, though, right?
I like the idea like there's people who do ayahuasca just to try and lose weight. They're like, I go just to vomit. The rest of okay, but here's what I'm curious. So there's a guide. I know I've heard there's a guide, but the guide is essentially I don't know, because I'm sure it varies, but like they're not on ayahuasca at the time, right?
Incorrect. I mean,
No, they are.
The
Okay.
experience that I've had is the guide, I would say, does a lower dose of the substance than if the guide were not doing the guiding. Like,
Right.
But the guide that I go to is a man, and he does he's like, we'll all have a drink, like me also, but he has done it for decades, and so
He knows
he is certainly, he knows how much he wants to take. And even still, like, there was one time I remember I went to Peru for a week with him and a small group of people, and there was one. This is a funny story to me, and I'll try to do it the justice to make it funny to you. At the end of every ceremony, he usually like rings this, plays this chime,
Okay.
and then says something that's, if not exactly this, basically the spirit of this. He'll say, well, dear sisters, brothers, we are in the finish of our ceremony for tonight. One more time, I'd like to give thanks to Mother Ayahuasca, for she gives teachings and medicine. One more time, I'd like to give thanks to Mother Earth, for she gives food, home, path, and work. One more time, I'd like to give thanks to our Creator of the heaven and the earth, Love, which is our true master. Thank you so much for everyone coming here and making possible this meeting with ayahuasca like a meditation. Thank you so much. And so it's a beautiful thing. He says it almost every time. just like that, one time in Peru, we had an experience where it was like, I think we did 5 over the course of a week, and it was maybe the middle one, and it was like the strongest one for what it seemed like everyone. Like there was some kind of communal energy going on that had been building through the week, and this was like the peak experience that he also seemed to be feeling. That's like the most under the influence I've ever seen him be, because
Right.
he's usually in control. As he ought be, and it wasn't that he was out of control, but at the end, as he's saying these things, he's not stumbling, but at one point he says, "I'd like to give thanks to Mother Earth, for she gives home, path, work, and many other things."
Yeah,
And
it's
just,
like, whoa.
I was like, "You forgot one of the things that you always say."
Yeah. Because I'm fucking twisted, y'all. He just breaks character completely. He's like, y'all, I'm fucking, whoa, you guys feeling this?
Do you want to hear one other real funny thing that happened once? That
Yes, of course.
he's so funny. So that whole thing happens this one time. I want to say it was like February 2015, Super Bowl weekend. I was there. Matt Ruby was there. That was his first time doing it. And
In Peru or here?
Oh, this is in Brooklyn, in New York
okay.
City. And the guide at the end of the ceremony, Saturday night, it was such another powerful experience. Actually, yeah. So I remember. I don't like. There's been so many of them for me now that I don't remember all of what happened at specific ones. But this one I do specifically remember, like some of the things that I thought and the things that I felt and the ideas that I had that like led to the hour of comedy that I just recorded last year. Like that, like seeds planted at this, maybe long ago, but harnessed and made manifest in a really visceral way at that point. But at the end, he goes through the thing. He says, thank you so much for all, Mother Ayahuasca, Mother Earth. Thank you to love. Thank you, everyone, for coming here and making possible this meeting like a meditation with ayahuasca. Thank you so much. And then at that moment, right from near him in the room, we hear a phone make a sound, and it goes, that's all, folks. And it seemed like an accident for a moment, and then as it was happening, I was like, nobody has their phone on, and we're like, oh, that's the guide's phone. He did that. He made it was like the funniest punchline, like with
Wait,
the
did he
setup
actually?
of, oh, I mean, yeah, he 100% did it on purpose.
Okay.
Had us through this entire spiritual experience, and then, gratitude, love, compassion, forgiveness, and that's all, folks. It just like it's the most I think, I went on Pete Holmes's podcast, I think maybe like a year or two later, and I think Pete always asks at the end, he's like, what's the hardest you've laughed? Or like, name one of the times that's the hardest you laughed. And like, this is a memorable, as a comedian, I love comedy. There's so many times that I laugh with my friends and at beautiful, wonderful stand-up, but like this stands out to me as like maybe the funniest thing that a not comedian has ever done in my life.
Like, thank you for earth and work and food and shelter and now Porky Pig.
Yeah.
Bam!
Exactly.
That's fucking great. Oh, that is funny. I'm glad you said that. I was like, oh, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, I would love to see everyone's now heightened level of enlightenment laugh, where you're laughing not just from like, you're laughing from like opened up pores and channelways, and you're laughing from the soul at that point. You're just like,
oh yeah.
Like it's
yeah. In the aftermath of it, like when we're all, sort of in the other room having food and sort of like, just kind of hopefully basking in like some afterglowish type feelings of having been through some shit and or learned some things or had this experience. I sometimes feel like I am I don't want to say the funniest that I ever am, but I'm funny in a different way.
Yeah.
Right after that it's just so much fun to inhabit, like, because it all happened. And I feel like that actually happens, the more you do stand-up, the more you become yourself, the more you discover yourself and who you want to be and what you are best at. And you can, hopefully when you go on stage, like just slip into it, or not even have to, because it's it's part of who you are and what you're doing and what you're occupying when you want to. But yeah, it's a special experience.
Well, my two final questions about it. 'Cause
Yes.
I know we'll get to your story. Wait, one, it's a tea, right? Because I've always wondered what form it comes in. It's a tea that you drink.
It is 100% called a tea, and I guess technically speaking, it is made of the two main ingredients, maybe the two only ingredients, are ayahuasca vines
Right.
and I believe chacruna leaves. So it is a drink made of leaves and vines, which I think technically does meet the definition of a tea. It's not hot. I mean, I assume it's hot when they're brewing it up, but we drink it, and it's like usually in like a shot glass sized thing, and you have either, sometimes depending on who you are and if he knows you, he like new people even could be just like a quarter of a shot. And then, maybe half a shot, maybe a full shot. You have the opportunity to have more later. But yeah, it's a shot glass full of a fascinating tasting tea brew.
Could you give me? Could you compare it to something taste wise?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, there's different like genres of it, or different strains, I guess, different colors of it that they say, and like some of them are sweeter than others, and some of them are real bitter. I want to say, like, I haven't had Jaeger in a long time, but like it's the first thing that I think of, like some kind of like bitter natural Jaeger.
That's funny because I one time long ago, someone said it tastes like Malort. Have you ever had Malort?
I haven't, but
It's just if you're Malort you can only get it in Chicago for some reason, and that should probably tell you enough about it. But yeah, it's like Jaeger's twin brother, but that's on house arrest and has to stay in Chicago. It's disgusting, but beautiful at the same time. Secondly, you've mentioned that there's food afterwards because you're fasting. I imagine the food is it's not like Popeyes, or is it? Do they just get you like?
Your assumption is right. So the diet leading up to it recommended is like essentially a vegan diet, and there's like other things to avoid, like other substances, caffeine as much as you can, and alcohol. No alcohol a few days before, no alcohol after, and so the diet leading up to and after is mostly they have a lot of fruit. There's usually like berries and mangoes, sometimes bananas, and they also have like I prefer like the softer, sweeter things, but they also have sometimes like crackers and hummus. But yeah, just kind of the food that I normally eat.
Wait, final question. No alcohol after. Is that permanent? That's not permanent, or is it?
Not. I mean, it's not permanent. It is these days more permanent for me. I have stopped drinking over the course of the past few years, but I think they say maybe like 3 days on either side, no drinking.
Interesting.
And I'm not sure what the physiological reason is. I do know that like there are people that if you don't follow the guidelines, there's some people who cannot follow the guidelines and be fine entirely in their system. But I've definitely I know that when I ate too much, too close to the experience, that was one of the things that contributed to great discomfort. Yeah. So I like following the guidelines. Like, if you want to be a self-investigative scientist and be like, what if I have just a sip? Like, there was one time on Thursday night before a Saturday ceremony, I went out to dinner with the guide and some other friends and people, and he ordered wine, and we were like, aren't you not supposed to, isn't the guideline like no alcohol like 3 days in advance? And at that point, I believe he said like a glass of wine 2 nights before is also like that. This won't be a problem.
Right.
So it's sort of like the way, like I call them spoiler alerts on food, like, the expiration dates. That's what I call spoiler alerts. It alerts you to when the food is going to spoil.
That is such a classic Mike Kaplan joke right there.
Oh yeah,
that is a classic, like triple entendre Mike Kaplan joke right there. Thank
you, Sean.
I haven't heard one of those in the person in too long, and it was like, yep, that it. Hey,
And
salute you, sir. Go, continue.
I appreciate it. It's from a long time ago. Also, I'll check when I tweeted it. It was probably years ago, but it's a fun one. It's
a fun one.
It's so long ago that I feel like a different person that I can enjoy. I'm like, I did. That's a funny thing that other person made. But specifically, you know how when there are expiration dates on food, like it can't be. And I'm sure Seinfeld has jokes about this. That I. It's a great observation that can't be. It doesn't turn bad at that moment.
At that moment,
they're
right,
telling
right.
you, hey, look, like on the 8th. That's when it's got. That's when you're gonna like. We're not gonna take any responsibility for this. Like, if you get sick after the 8th, you could get sick after the 8th. But up till the 8th, it's our fault. But afterwards, and so I feel like they're like 3 days. You want to keep a 3-day perimeter, alcohol free. And if somebody's like, come on, I could do it 2 days. Like, yeah, you'll probably be okay with 2 days, but we say 3 days because maybe there's a real sensitive person who needs to do it 4 days.
Has anyone? No, you've never. I doubt this has happened. But have you ever experienced like a first timer shows up to one of these sessions just hammered, and they're like, you gotta go, dude. You can't. We're not gonna let this happen."
Not that specifically, but I have been at places where I'm not privy to all like the bureaucratic runnings of the the organizing of this thing. But there have been times when I've sort of caught a snippet here and there of like, oh, this person can't do this tonight for some reason. I don't think it's because they're there drunk, but other indicators have let the facilitators know because they want it to be, a good, safe space and time for everyone.
Well, because like it reminded me of like when I was 17, because we're talking about drugs. One of the first times I ever did LSD was very dosage wise, it was very weak. Like we're definitely augmented, but we weren't like out of our minds. But there was one guy who showed up to this like sort of hang where we were, who was just shit faced out of his mind and was a very jocular dude, but liked us stoner kids because we amused him. But he demanded to do acid. He was like, I want to do some now. And we still had some, but it was like, we're not going to give it to him because he's not going to be able to handle it. So we like placebo affect him. So we like gave him just like, we gave him just basically like a square. We like cut out a little square, like ripped off a little square of paper. Very like from an Adam Sandler, that's where we got the idea. Was like, oh dude, fucking like that. You remember that Adam Sandler track on one of his albums where he keeps giving the guy's like, oh, it must be this acid. He's like, that wasn't acid, that was just a square of paper. But we did.
Yes.
We gave the dude the shit, and he tripped with us, and like I don't think we ever actually told him the truth. Like, but he had an experience. You know what I mean? Like whether it be real or not. Like, and I think I know ayahuasca is 100% the real thing, but I also know like everyone I know, yourself, pretty much everyone who's done it has come out of it with this sort of like, you have the most realistic response. You have this very like, no, I mean, it's ups, it's downs, it's work like anything, but I enjoy it. It does something for me. But most people who've only done it 2 or 3 times that I've talked to will have a very like, I'm a new person now. I don't need my meds anymore. I can, you know what I mean? Like, I have a better relationship with my parents. I've accepted my flaws. And then some people, comedians, very fucking successful comedians I've heard be like, I vomited up all the darkness. I saw the incarnate of everything wrong with me and I slayed my nemesis and I have come back now a better person. And you're like, I feel like those are, the newbie experiences that you wanted to have. So the ayahuasca guided you in that direction. But you, someone who's a veteran of it at this point, you realize like, well, it ain't always going to be that way. It's like you said, it's a journey. Yeah.
Everything that you just said, those are like dead on. Like you've been an investigative journalist. Like you've been taking copious notes. Like those are like legit. A good buddy of mine did it with me for like, I think it was my 3rd time, his 1st time.
And I think we're talking about the same person here because I've had this conversation with who I think is the same person.
It makes sense that, I mean, he came out of it like, he's like, my relationship with my mother has changed. And since then, like he always has that memory of that experience, and it
Right.
doesn't mean that everything that he or his mother does like will like from henceforth on be like, you are an angel and I am an angel, and we still do not have human flaws and foibles that we need
Right.
to like work on and discuss. But it can be a helpful thing in taking steps in directions that you either want to go or need to go, or like that you might not have even been aware like that were the things that were valuable for you to experience. And for sure, I was one of the people at first that I was like, this, like, I feel changed. And I mean, and I was, I am,
Yeah, sure.
I am in many ways very different. And in some ways, like, the Buddhist, the Zen koan type thing of chop wood, carry water, like before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And how do I do it? What do I do? Like with stand-up, you're like, well, you just got to write and perform. That's all you can do. And then eventually you're like, oh, I totally get it. Finally, years later, I get it. Oh, wow, what's the secret? Well, you just write and perform. That's all you do.
You just keep doing it. Yeah, that's a good, that's I've actually never heard the chop wood carry water one before, but that makes a little, it's like oh God, yeah. Like that's,
it's good. It's like you're going around not in a circle, but a spiral. Like you're going around and you're either a little higher or a little deeper than where you were, but also you're from above at the same exact point.
Right.
Here's one other fun thing, like the idea, like some people are worried that ayahuasca will make them go like out of their minds. And be like, maybe you should be worried about, some people are worried about going into their minds.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The guy who you dosed with a placebo of acid who tripped, like he was clearly already on a trip. He was clearly already in the mental place that he was or wasn't.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and the placebo effect is powerful. You are right.
Yeah. I mean, we also did. I've also done that, with part of a group that did that with a keg of Coors Cutter in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in the year 1999, where it was like, that's Coors Cutter's non-alcoholic beer, but we got a keg of it, and people got shit-faced off of it, which is like interesting to watch that happen, but it's like you just said, some people are afraid to go into their mind because the mind inside of it is way more powerful than outside of it. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, I'll just add this maybe last thing about this, that I know that Ramdas, you know Ramdas?
I am not actually. I'm familiar now.
Oh, he's a spiritual teacher, writer, guide, died recently, but used to work with Timothy Leary at Harvard. And like when Timothy Leary got fired, and Ramdas left, and then his journey was to become this learner and teacher, and he wrote this amazing book called Be Here Now. And a thing that he says that, let's see if I can remember why I even began saying it to try and trace this back. That sometimes when meditating, and then the analogy for me works with ayahuasca is sometimes there's like an asteroid belt to get through. Like some people are like, I can't meditate because if I sit down with my thoughts, they're bouncing all over the place. And like that doesn't mean that you can't meditate. That means that that's there all the time, and that meditation is something that might, if you want to, help you look at what is there, and then potentially go through it, examine it, and then potentially get to the other side of the asteroid belt, which the way that ayahuasca sometimes feels is it feels like there is this asteroid belt at first that you're physically and potentially emotionally like what is gonna happen? And then maybe, ideally, you get through that, and then you're in this other space, this other mental, this other spiritual, this other emotional headspace. And so I feel like the fear of going into your mind is the fear of the asteroid belt without the knowledge or realization or confidence that it can be navigated, that the asteroid belt might not kill you, and that, by traveling through it, then you might, gain a different perspective.
Makes you a better pilot. You're able to fly the course of your own life better. Yeah, man. Fuck depth. Wait,
yeah.
so Mike, let's get to this part because then I'm gonna.
Sure.
May I have your 5 words?
Happy to provide. And it's actually, in a way, a perfect segue to the first word. The first word is mushrooms.
Cool.
Do you want them in order that they appear in the story, or does it matter what order?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Another word is dogs.
Dogs.
Another word is signs.
Signs. Okay.
Yep. SIGNS, not like
Gotcha.
Jason Signs. So I give you mushrooms, dogs, signs,
Right.
and Shane.
Shane. Okay.
And I wrote down more than 5 words, but if I'm picking the last one, I guess I'll say rescue.
Oh, man. So the 5 words you've chosen to give me are mushrooms, dogs, signs, Shane, rescue. Now, this was my fault. I didn't communicate this properly. You're supposed to give me a story I've clearly never heard before because this is a Mike Kaplan classic. Everyone knows this one. So basically, you mentioned earlier that you went to Brandeis and then Boston University for what people also don't know about you is you didn't come from money. And though you are a very smart guy, you were kind of a slacker in high school. Everybody knows this. You know, everybody knows about high school Mike Kaplan, the trouble you used to get into, how you used to. And so, we're not going to call it sex work, but you made money. But you paid your way through Boston University by selling psychedelic mushrooms. Everyone knows this. And how did you get these mushrooms? Well, they grow underneath dog shit or cow shit, but they're easier to find with dogs. So a thing that you used to do back in your graduate days is you would borrow someone's dog for a night. You'd borrow someone's dog for a night to help you snoop out the mushrooms, and then you'd return the dog the next day, no harm, no foul. However, one day you borrowed someone's dog, and when you went to bring it back, there were signs everywhere that said, "Our dog, Shane, is missing. It's missing. Reward." But you, being the smart guy you were like, "Oh, shit. Here's how I could stop fucking selling mushrooms to pay my way through college and just do it this way." And you showed up like, "Hey, I rescued your dog, Shane. It was about to get hit by a car. I found it." And you got the reward, and that was enough to pay off the rest of your grad school.
Now, Sean, this is kind of embarrassing because I thought that you were gonna like make up some stuff, but it's weird that you did know the actual story. So
that is. So let me just to recap. You were stealing people's dogs to help you find mushrooms to sell. And one day you ended up stealing a dog where the owner thought the dog was missing and put out signs. The dog's name was Shane. And you showed up with the dog that you already had saying, "I rescued your dog," and took the reward anyway. That's not what happened?
Exactly. Oh, no, that is... you're close. So I was in Boston.
Okay.
The year was 2008.
Good year. Obama just won or was going to win? What? Obama was going to win?
It was April or May. It was like nice weather out.
Oh, yeah.
And it was definitely between March and June, because I know that because March is when Shane Moss and I both taped Live at Gotham on Comedy Central.
Right.
And we were that was our first TV appearance, both of us. Or maybe he'd been on Conan before. It was my first TV appearance, but we were both on the same episode of Live at Gotham. And then it was going to air in June. We'd taped it. It was going to air in June.
Right.
And so I knew this was in the time in between. And I was like, I was in grad school, but I was done with responsibilities at this particular point. And I did enjoy a nice psychedelic mushroom trip. You're very wrong about me selling mushrooms because I have only had the opposite experience of buying them. And once I bought them, at that time, I almost never wanted to sell them. I hardly even want. Now I love sharing. It's great to have a shared experience with a friend. But at the time when I had a limited supply, I was like, I think I'm going to keep the we're all oneness to myself.
Right.
I don't want to be we're all one with others, just
Right.
we're all one me.
Yeah, exactly.
So that morning, that on this particular morning, I woke up, didn't eat, I think, almost any food, which I don't recommend if you're going to do psychedelic mushrooms. But I was like, but they'll be more powerful if I don't have other food in my system. And that was true. So for a while, I was walking around just the Esplanade in Boston, like just right by the river. And then I was walking back through the I think down Newbury Street, sort of like the like 6th Avenue of Boston.
Right.
And like just bunch of stores, bunch of like I was like, oh, this is nice people around. I was kind of just singing to myself, and then all of a sudden I felt what I now know to be hunger, but at the time felt like existential dread.
Okay.
And I felt and physical weakness. And so I was like, I don't think I can even move anymore. Like I don't feel like I could get across the street in the time it takes from it going walk to not walk. So I was like, I'm just going to sit down.
Oh, shit.
And so I sat down on a street in Boston, I believe Gloucester. And Gloucester,
which is spelled Gloucester, right?
Exactly. You know your streets.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting on Gloucester between Newbury and it must be Com Ave, I think, if I'm getting my streets right around there. And I start to think, what do I do? I then at this point, the mushrooms are really kicking in hard, and I'm like, I don't know what is real. Like I don't like we talked about before. Like I don't know if this is all a hallucination. And so I started seeing all like people walking their dogs by me because it was a nice day.
Sure.
But seeing all those dogs, like sometimes they would look at me, and the people would look at me because I'm a guy sitting on the sidewalk where you don't normally that's not a thing that everyone's doing.
Right.
And so but I see the dogs looking at me, and I'm like, is this like a rescue mission? Like, is there somebody, am I in a coma somewhere in a hospital? I was like watching Grey's Anatomy at the time. So I'm like, is this not the reality of that I think it is? I'd also just watched an episode of Buffy where she was not sure whether she was in an asylum in the quote real world or and hallucinating that she was the vampire slayer, savior of the universe. Like, and her family in the real world were like, what's more likely, that you are a girl with mental health challenges or that you are the one person who is put here, selected to save the universe from demons and vampires and other creatures who create the apocalypse? And she's like, that's a really good point. And so I'm like, at that point, I'm like, am I an old man and I'm senile and this is what dementia is like? Because I have a memory of leaving my house this morning. Was that not actually this morning? I have a memory of a couple months ago, like being on TV. I'm going to be on TV. Is it more likely that I'm a senile old man or that I'm a guy who's going to be on TV as a stand-up comedian for the first time when I can't even speak right now? And like my phone was, I think,
dude.
almost my recorder, my digital recorder full of jokes died. And I'm like, I can't even find out if there are jokes on here. And I look through my phone, and as we've mentioned earlier, my friend Micah Sherman, one of my best friends, was in my phone. I had just met Micah Fox, and we had started dating, or were about to start dating. So I'm looking through my phone, and I'm like, Micah. I'm like, everyone is me in my phone. This is
oh God, dude.
And so then I finally get to Shane, and I'm like, Shane, that's a different person, I hope. And I called Shane Moss, my friend, and mushroom extraordinaire connoisseur. He has a movie called, I believe, Psychonautics.
Yeah.
Has toured with a show about psychedelics. He's
all
written
about it.
Hours of material. I'm like, this is the guy to talk to. I was like, Shane? He's like, hey, buddy. I was like, you and me are different people, right? And he's like, yeah, why do you ask? I'm like, because I took some mushrooms. He's like, okay. And he's like, where are you right now? And I'm like, let me look at the signs. And I looked, and I was like, I'm at the corner of One Way and Do Not Enter. And he's like, look at some other signs, buddy. And I was like, okay. I'm at Commonwealth and Gloucester. And if I'm in this dimension, that's where I am. And he says, that's like 2 blocks from my house. Do you want to come walk over here? And I was like, I cannot. He's like, okay, I'll come rescue you. And then a few minutes later, he's on the phone. Maybe he's on with the phone with me the whole time. And he's like, I'm at the intersection you said, and I don't see you. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not. And he's like, oh no, you're halfway down the block. I was like, oh, thank goodness. I got in the car and he took me to his home and gave me like orange juice to help it work its way through my system faster, and then gave me salad to eat. And as I was eating and I was like coming back to the human being, the non-senile, non-in limbo, non-dead as far as I knew, Mike Kaplan incarnation that I believed I had been in the morning and forgot about halfway through, I was like, are we going to be on TV in a month? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, that does seem unlikely, though. So, and that, I think, is the story. Did I use all the words?
Yeah. Dude, that's so fucking crazy because, like, yeah, I've had that. Yeah, we've all been on that threshold. And any those of us who've done the psychedelics anyway, but also, like, Shane is, as you were saying that, I'm like, he is the perfect guy to call because he does have that sort of like that sort of like gentle giant voice, you know. He's got there's like a depth to he's a baritone for sure, but like a very like it's a very melodic sort of way Shane talk. Hey buddy, how are you doing? And he's also like he's got that friend, like he looks like an ant. Yeah, like in the way like a tree person. Like he's a tall.
Even more so now. Have you seen him during the pandemic?
I have not seen him during the pandemic.
You should try to either get on a Zoom with him or go to his Instagram. He's growing out his hair and beard, and there's an image of him side by side with like a super shaggy like sheep, and it's like he's like a sheep or a sheepdog or a gentle giant fantasy creature I was grateful to have on my side.
I wonder. I'm looking at him right now on Instagram. It's like, yep, that's the natural Shane Moss. He's the only guy I've ever seen. I don't know if Shane still drinks alcohol, but a few years ago, we were at South by Southwest Comedy Festival. Just the festival, but we were there for the comedy portion. And he used to live in Austin, and we were having drinks, and the bartender at this one after spot situation goes, hey Shane, I'm just not comfortable serving you anymore, man. You look kind of wasted to me. And Shane just goes, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to look so wasted. Just like in a genuine way, right? And like we all laughed, and Shane, we all finished our drink, and the bartender just gives him one more, and it's like, that's the last one. Like it's almost like the bartender felt bad for telling the ent, like, you've had enough, tree god. Okay, one more. You're right. But that's a great. That should be filmed. What you just said, the story you just told, the rescue.
Thanks, man.
That could be just a great little like 10-minute short film of just like, because I think everyone who's ever done any sort of drug or any sort of substance that isn't alcohol, that something that brings you out, has had a version of that. Like, oh God, and then you have to have that one friend who's like, I am here for you. And
now it's, eventually you hopefully get to a place where you can be that friend for yourself in moments.
Damn, I love when it wraps up with a point. Mike Kaplan, always. Wait, so and you said you have an album out. I think I saw you just post about a brand new album.
It came out in May. I posted
under a year.
Yes, I posted today that there were some very kind year-end, like comedy wrap-ups that are like, hey, these are the top 11 comedy albums of the year, the top, sweet. 100 comedy things. And so I posted those few links. But it came out, I recorded it in 2019. I released it in May of 2020, and it's called AKA, and it has a pretty sizable chunk about ayahuasca and my experiences that arose out of, if not that one and only that one, experience that I mentioned from about 5 years ago. Yeah, it's the best comedy album that I have released. I'm super happy with it. I'm proud of it, and a lot of people have been saying nice things, and I really appreciate it. So, yeah, if anyone, look, you're on the internet, you know how to find things on the internet. It's called AKA, and I'm called Mike Kaplan.
I would say, please, if you're listening, which you are, if you're hearing that, like, get Mike's album, AKA, listen to Mike's comedy. If you haven't heard it, if I had to compare you to a vegetable, it would be an onion, because there are many, many, many layers, and
Ah.
you will find yourself crying, but from laughter. So,
That's beautiful. And
yeah,
also, if I may add one more thing about
please
an onion that will add layers to even what you just said.
do
So
it.
the album is called AKA, which is a palindrome. Same backwards and forwards, K in the middle, A's on the outside.
Right.
It was originally called All Killing Aside. That was the name of the Edinburgh show that became the album. But we
Ah,
decided releasing it mid-pandemic not to have an album with killing out of context in the title. And we're like,
right.
oh, AKA actually works for all kinds of reasons, because AKA also means an alias, an alternate title, and that's what this is. And I had like a whole thing that I would, when I was promoting the album when it came out, that I would add all of these layers to. But here's the new one
Yeah.
for that I'm really delighting in is the album has many layers. The album itself is like sort of Inception themed and structured, with
Okay.
like basically like a conceptual palindrome. Like the first and last tracks are about the same thing. And it all leads to the middle and comes back out like a bunch of parentheses opening and closing. I think I don't want to say that everybody who is obsessive or compulsive will appreciate, but I also am on that spectrum and do like closing a parenthesis here and there. And
Yeah,
so
sure.
to close this multi-layered parenthesis, I love that the same way that AKA has a K in the middle, perhaps for Kaplan, and A's all around for all, onion has an I in the middle, like me, and it's on either side. On the beginning, on the end, and that's how you spell onion. On, I, on.
You're
Like
right.
onion
It
is not a
is. Yeah.
it's a conceptual palindrome itself, like the show, like the title, AKA.
Holy shit. You see that? And that was only 3 minutes there. So like, get the whole thing and listen.
Oh
That's
yeah.
that's great, man. That's actually, I'm gonna think about that. On ion. That's fun. Yeah, it's like palindrome adjacent. You know,
It is.
but like it's like you know what it is, and that's, if palindromes are the mafia, Onion's like a good fella. You know what I mean? It's like,
Ha!
we can't. I'm not pure blood, but I'm good fella. I'm one of them.
I love it. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's we got something in common. Yeah, we got mutual goals. We're doing
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same thing here, but yeah.
We're the same guy, only your N and your O is flipped, in your blood. You got your type NO, I'm type ON. That's all it is.
Yeah,
It's
and
fun.
what you want to do is just make sure to not say NO to us. You want to say ON, not NO.
It's on. You say it's on, not no. Boom, boom. This is great. The mafia. All right, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on, man. I hope everything
Thank
is
you.
good with you. I hope you're healthy, and everyone dig into some Mike Kaplan. It's good stuff. It's some of
Thank
the
you so
best
much, buddy.
fucking written stuff. All right. Thank you, Mike. Talk to you again very soon.
Yeah, so great to see you, buddy.